Prisons. Most of my viewers are inside one. Hopefully you're in one of those soft Swedish prisons. If you're going to commit a crime, do it in Sweden. I've always said that. But some prisons are not Swedish. Some of them are unpleasant places. Throughout history there have been prisons whose notoriety spread far and wide. Their brutal treatment of inmates or physical conditions meant they were known by nicknames, like the Black Hole of Calcutta or the Devil's Island. But I've already made a video on places like that. This time I want to look at one specific prison. It's a prison where conditions were more than adequate, and those inside were treated better than most. Yet despite this, many remember it as the most notorious prison in the world, thanks to the political situation surrounding it, elaborate conspiracy theories, and because for a long time it had just one prisoner. So there's this place called Germany, and a while ago they went to war with the world. Long story short, it didn't go well. Germany found itself occupied by four major powers: America, France, Britain, and the USSR. They divided Germany into four zones that each of them were responsible for. France got the smallest zone. That's got nothing to do with this video, I just wanted to point it out. Berlin was deep within the Soviet zone, but as the capital of Germany, it too was divided into four zones. You might be wondering why I'm telling you this. It will soon become clear. Also, after the war, 22 high-ranking Nazis were put on trial. They were some of Germany's most powerful men during the war, but now they were accused of crimes against humanity. After 11 months of intense judgment through a legal grey zone, half of the men were sentenced to death, 3 were acquitted, and 7 were given hefty prison terms. But this verdict presented another challenge. Where exactly would those 7 men serve out their sentence? After all, they were no ordinary prisoners. It had the potential of becoming a real brouhaha, so a small, largely forgotten facility was chosen: Spandau Prison. First built in 1876 as a military detention centre, Spandau was always notorious. Officially the subject of strict secrecy, rumours spread of inmates being tortured and sometimes even murdered. By the early years of Nazi Germany, Spandau was used to detain political prisoners. Again, rumours spread that opponents of Hitler were tortured here. Yet still only a small amount of people were interned here, and by the end of the war it was abandoned. But now in 1947 it was chosen to house the 7 prisoners of Nuremberg. A prison large enough for 600 now held just 7 inmates. But like I said, they were no ordinary prisoners. Baldur von Schirach, governor of Vienna and chief of the Hitler Youth. Karl Dönitz, the last ruler of Nazi Germany, named in Hitler's will as his successor. Konstantin von Neurath, high-ranking diplomat. Erich Raeder, Grand Admiral of the German Navy. Albert Speer, head of war production and personal architect of Adolf Hitler. Walter Funk, president of the Central Bank of Germany, economist of the Holocaust. Rudolf Hess, deputy Führer, the second highest ranking of all Nazis. Spandau Prison was located in the British sector of Berlin, but the prison itself was under a joint security agreement. The 4 powers each took turns guarding the prison, broken down into 3 months per shift, each ending with an elaborate changing of the guard ceremony. During the French, British and American periods, the inmates were treated rather well, but when the Soviet guards arrived, it was a whole different story. According to inside sources, Soviet officials wanted them to drink their retribution to the bottom of the cup. We can only imagine what that means, but it was probably something very Eastern European. But since they were Nazis, there was little objection to this, and so for decades these 7 men lived in almost complete isolation. As time went on, some of them were released early. Albert Speer was not. He wrote his memoirs on sheets of toilet paper, smuggling the sheets out of Spandau. But even he was eventually released. In fact, all were eventually set free, apart from Rudolf Hess. For 20 years Hess was the sole prisoner of Spandau. Formerly the second most powerful figure in Germany, he was now the world's loneliest man, guarded by 4 countries in an entire prison just for him. As you'd imagine, maintaining a prison with dozens of ever-shifting guards was very expensive, but no matter what, Soviet officials shot down any suggestion of releasing him. Few people were allowed near the prison, fueling a whole slew of conspiracy theories. One theory told that the man inside Spandau was not Hess, but an innocent man who had been framed. It was said the real Hess had escaped to South America or had been secretly employed by the CIA. Rumors like this will always be a part of the legacy of Spandau prison, but the truth is, it's unlikely any method of releasing Hess would have been secret for long. Despite being such a high-ranking statesman, Rudolf Hess was a lunatic. He was a deeply paranoid hypochondriac, believing he had all kinds of diseases, and turning to occultism to cure himself. The older he got, the more he relied on strange rituals and astrology. Then in 1941 he took a small aircraft and flew it to Scotland. As Deputy Führer, he hoped to negotiate with the British, but that just didn't work. First of all, he ran out of fuel and had to parachute to the ground. Then he was captured by a Scottish farmer, who turned him over to police. British doctors believed he was a paranoid schizophrenic, so they just kept him as a prisoner. It's a pretty whimsical end to someone's career considering his job title was Deputy Führer of Nazi Germany. But to be fair, his name was Rudolf. How bad could he be? The last years of his life were horrendous. His family were only allowed to see him for half an hour per month, and he could only send and receive a single letter per month. He would lie awake screaming into the night, complaining of stomach pain, but the doctors knew it was all in his head. Sometimes they would pretend to give him powerful medication, but it was just a placebo. In 1987, Rudolf Hess was found dead at the age of 93. According to the official story, he hanged himself and left a suicide note, but the Hess family lawyer claimed he was murdered. Many believe a frail 93-year-old would simply not have been able to hang himself. It's said he was killed by the British so they could finally shut down the prison. After the demolition, all building materials were either buried or thrown into the sea, so maybe there is some truth to that. I suspect we may never truly understand what happened in Spandau prison.